Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Neal and Amie podcast. We, this season, are journeying through the topics around helping people find their way. And today we have a very special treat because though we have Amie downstairs below us, not in participation of today's episode, we have a great male replacement by the name of Craig Johnson joining us today. So that's going to be pretty exciting. And as always, we've got Eric here with us as well.
Hello.
And today, this episode is it's a special one for me. It's the first time I've been able to have a conversation that is recorded with my dear friend, Dr. Craig Johnson. He is a pastor of Bethel Christian Fellowship down in Agoura Hills. Craig, that is right. It's Agoura Hills, right?
That's right, Agoura Hills.
Wonderful. And Craig and I, over the last 15 years, I just got to give a little setup to this talk. He and I met about, 13 to 15 years ago, I'm guessing. And he has been absolutely instrumental in me finding the way. And he's been a voice to Amie and I in times where life was dark. He has also shown up in times where we didn't even know that we needed him, and he'd just drop a phone call or he'd give us, some kind of a ray of hope. And we talk often about needing safe people in our lives, people that are like what we would say like a crew type member. And Craig is not only somebody that I journey with as a friend, but he's certainly somebody who I journey with and consider him an excellent coach, mentor, pastor, whatever you want to call that. So Craig is going to, yesterday we were having a conversation, and it was, as I was talking with him, we were talking about grief, talking about Amie, and talking about some of what she was going through. And then I dawned on me, if people could just listen in to these talks that I'm having with this man, I think that it would just be such a great thing. So for you, the listener, this particular episode is a special one, and we're going to be talking today about grief and loss, and this is on the heels. This is really what sparked this. If you've been following the last couple of weeks, you know that Amie has had a hysterectomy procedure, and with that, part of the journey for a woman is they struggle. They have to, learn to walk through some missing parts. And so Craig and I laugh a lot. That's a thing that we do. We make jokes about things that some might think are kind of sick jokes, twisted jokes, and you'll hear it. You'll hear his twisted laugh come out, and you'll think, does this man really love God, or has he got some other kind of thing going on? We're not so sure. Anyway, he's a special man. So with that being said, I want to introduce you all to Dr. Craig Johnson.
Hey, Neal. Wow. That was a great introduction. I was actually drifting off to sleep.
So boring.
Well, it's a privilege to be here. Yeah, yesterday we were talking about the process of grief, which is, it's interesting to me that Deuteronomy 6:23 says, he led us out in order to lead us in. With all of life is leaving and entering, that process of leaving and entering. We leave the womb to enter into life. We leave childhood to enter into adulthood. We leave, grade school to move into middle school, and we leave singlehood and go into marriage. All of life is leaving and entering. It's the primary cycle of our life that nobody teaches us how to leave, which implies grieving a loss, before we move into a new state of affairs.
Yeah.
So, it's the primary cycle of life. We're talking about Amie and grief, and we have to grieve every loss we ever experience.
Yeah, it struck me when you were talking how you said we're not taught how. Like, that really caught me, because I think we're taught to suck it up. We're taught to, just act like nothing's wrong, get over it quick or whatever. And that's what you were saying yesterday about Amie. Like, she's literally had preciousness, her ability to, be identified female. That was not new, gender specific language that I'm throwing here, but she lost it. And if I were just to say, hey, come on, let's go, like, get over it. Let's get on down the road. That not only would that be insensitive, it'd be wrong, but that's often what we're learning.
Well, we're taught to gain things and hold on to them in our culture. We're not taught how to lose anything. I don't remember as a child the first loved one that died in your family, or a pet that died, or and grief isn't just tied to death. I mean, every time you grieve the loss of youth, the loss of opportunities, the loss of independence as you get older, the loss of functioning abilities, the loss of a body part. I mean, whenever you lose something that you had a meaningful emotional connection to, you have to go through the natural process of grief. And we mentioned yesterday that kids are experts at teaching us if we watch. They're hurt, they cry hysterically, then they play. Hurt, they cry, they play. That's the process of grief right there.
Right.
And it's a process we have to enter into, and it doesn't just happen ipso facto. I remember as a child losing just a toy my parents had taken from me. And, we don't want to minimize the children's losses, because in their little world, when you take something from them, when there's a divorce in the family and you lose your primary security in life, when a loved one dies, we'll deal with that in a second. That's the obvious severing of an intimate connection. But even the little things we would dismiss as insignificant have to be reckoned with. And so we sort of are walking around with stockpiled grief in our souls, like a million beach balls pushed under the water.
Right.
And we wonder why we have indigestion and depression,
well,
and suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, and you're trying to hold one ball down. Meanwhile, the other one's popping up, and you're using your leg to try to press that one down. It's just a life of suppression, and probably leads to depression and every other thing. Yes. So to me, what I hear you saying in that is that it's very important, because you referred to yourself as a young boy losing your teddy bear and how devastating that was at that time. And that it might sound silly to a grown-up, but to a kid, it's everything. And so that, learning how to process, loss on a little level, that to somebody might be a big level. It seems like if we were to learn to process on the small losses of life, then maybe we could have a healthier process when it gets to the larger losses of life.
Absolutely. Like we say in dealing with our children, we would rather have them suffer a setback young in life, when they're just beginning in business, than to lose a $30 million company. Right. We have to learn to process little things, taking baby steps. And so grief really is anything we lose that we have a meaningful connection to. That could be a person, a place, a thing, a condition. Then we start realizing, my goodness, and then we go in, then the people say, suck it up. Oh, come on, you're getting too emotional. Oh, heaven's sakes, move on. Well, I like the Apostle Paul. He moved on from things he'd resolved and reconciled himself to. Paul the Apostle said, this one thing I do, I move on. Yeah, he moves on after he processed the things behind him. We're always leaving an injury. That means we're always in the process of grieving where we've come from in order to enter into a new state of affairs. So grieving is a process. It's sort of that we can learn some techniques that can help us. It doesn't need to be the loss of a parent. If we live long enough, we are all going to experience, cataclysmic losses. But I think we can learn the principles, some helpful principles of grief. Absolutely. That will deal with small, medium, or large grief opportunities.
That's solid. And I want to, hopefully by the end of our talk today, if we can kind of arrive at some of the tactical or principle-based thoughts on how to deal with those things. But I want to kind of just continue to kind of lay that foundation or that groundwork for what people struggle with, and kind of that identifying that, man, these struggles are real. These struggles keep us stuck. They make us feel small. They make us feel insignificant. They make us feel like we're never going to make it, never going to win, never going to overcome, all of that. As a principle, and Craig, I don't know how much I've shared this particular mission. I know we've had lots of conversations, but for the listener, we're constantly saying, that our objective, Amie and I's objective, is to help people find their calling or find their mission in life and make their life count, because life's too short, right, to live miserable. and grief and misery often are like closely connected. It's when we don't know how to grieve, then we stay stuck in misery, stay stuck in turmoil, stay stuck in the past. And ultimately what that does then is it keeps us from arriving, or it keeps us from maturing, or it keeps us from entering into that next level or that next phase. So I don't know, like what maybe sometimes what thoughts or times in your life, did you feel stuck, or did you feel like, man, I had to grieve the loss of this before I could enter into that kind of a thing? Does anything come to mind?
Well, there's an interesting phrase, only grief permits newness, that we have to significantly grieve what we lose so that there's an open door of newness before us. And one of the things that was helpful to me is a lady named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. In 1969, she wrote a book called On Death and Dying. And she laid out 5 steps that we all go through in the process of grief. Now, she's talking specifically about death, about a loved one dying, or you getting a death sentence, that you're going to die. But the 5 principles are so important that they're built into a little pneumatic device. If the folk could get their little pen and paper out right now and write this out. It's called DABDA, D-A-B-D-A, DABDA, D-A-B-D-A. Just write that on a piece of paper, and then I'm going to give you each one. D is denial, denial. The A of DABDA is anger. So down the list, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. DABDA. Now, this is amazing. When you commit this to your memory and you get comfortable with this, this is a pneumatic device that can help you in every instance of grief. And we'll go through them: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And Dr. Ross discovered that these 5 stages are always involved with grief. They may be out of order, in a different order, but you always go through these 5. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And this is the example I use. Let's say you run out to your car in the morning, and if you're late one more time at work, you're going to be fired. And you get in the car, and the car doesn't work. You left the lights on all night. And so the first stage is denial. Oh, my God, I can't believe this car is not going to work. No, please, you can't. This cannot be happening to me.
Right.
If I'm late one more day, I'm going to lose my job. Then denial leads to anger, which is, you stupid car. I shouldn't have bought this thing. It's a piece of trash. When I bought it, I was told not to buy it. Going to anger. Then we go into bargaining. Please, car, please start. Please, just start one more time, and I promise I'll oil you every 3,000 miles. And then we go into depression. Oh, no, the battery is dead. I left the light on. And then you go to acceptance. It's like, okay, well, there are bigger problems in life. I'm probably going to lose the job, but maybe I'm going to call AAA now. So you see, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. These are the 5 stages of grief. Mm-hmm. And what I did is I memorized these 5, and I apply these in my life whenever I've gone through loss, whether it's small, medium size, or large. First, it's denial. I can't believe this is happening. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross pointed out, when you get a doctor's death sentence, whether it's you're going to physically die or we're going to remove an organ from your body, whenever you're threatened with imminent loss, first there's denial. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. This is a movie. Everything's in slow motion. It's surreal. Then you go to anger. Why is this happening to me?
Mm-hmm. It's the why God.
I can't
moment.
believe it. And then you bargain. Oh God, please get me out of this, and I'll never ask you again till next time. And then depression. Oh my God, I'm going to die. And then acceptance, like, okay, well, heaven isn't that bad. And then, so we go through these 5 things, whether we number them or not, as a pneumatic device.
Right.
These are the 5 stages of grief.
Yeah. And each one of them, as you look at those, it's like, man, some people get stuck in denial, stuck in anger, stuck in depression. Yeah. And it's like, I guess where you're going with this, and it applies so aptly, that if we don't figure out how to grieve well, we get stuck in something that happened 10 years ago. Oh no, my mom took my teddy bear and I still hate her to this day, whatever that may be. I wasn't trying to dog you on your teddy bear story either.
I always like to say, Neal, there's no mystery to our history.
Okay.
There isn't.
That's good.
We always want it to be mysterious. Oh, I can't understand. I call it sowing and weeping. I mean, most everything we're reaping in our lives involves seed we've been sowing for an extended period of time. I mean, we abuse our bodies and destroy them, and then we wonder why we're having symptoms.
Right.
And this is a really important thing. I mean, I always like to distinguish between fruits and roots with issues in my own life and in other people's lives. Fruits, if you lay an axe to the root of the tree, the fruit of the tree will die. The fruit is not really, that's symptomatic. And we Christians often are just crazy about being fruit inspectors and just looking at the fruit. Well, if you deal with the root, that deals automatically with the fruit. Mm-hmm. So if you get stuck in any of these, we know people that are stuck in the denial phase. They haven't even accepted they've been born yet, and they're 45.
Right.
You don't even, you're in denial. Or anger.
About
they're frozen in anger.
You're making this too personal,
word
man.
of knowledge. Come on, brother. It's getting good now.
Yeah.
Or people that get stuck in anger, and we know that. It's like they're always angry, but they don't know anything that they're angry. They really don't understand anger. Mm-hmm. And I mean, not to be filled with too many pneumatic devices, but if everybody has their little pen there, here's a good one too. It's called Ahen, A-H-E-N, Ahen. And that is anger, hurt, expectation, need. Anger, hurt, expectation, need. Anger is never the root. It's always a fruit. You always, when you're angry, you have to look under anger, and there's always a hurt. And then under the hurt, there was an expectation you wanted to be met, and under that is a need. So I needed you to listen to me and not make it about you. I expected you to listen to me, but you didn't. Now I'm hurt. Now I'm angry. Yeah. Anger is always a fruit, never a root. So it's like when I'm angry, I go, Craig, what are you hurt about? Well, you're hurt because they didn't value you, and you expected them to value you, and you had a need to be valued. So I, in my head, go, okay, what was my need? I always trace. I'll go, okay, I needed to be heard in this conversation. Neal would not shut up, and he would not listen to me. My expectation is frustrated. Now I'm hurt. Now I'm angry.
Yeah.
And but that's just anger. If you get frozen in anger, that second stage of grief, you don't advance. You go in circularity.
Right.
And we always say in therapeutic circles, recover or repeat. Mm-hmm. So when you find yourself locked in one of these 5 stages of grief, it's important to get unstuck. Yeah. But you have to know where you're stuck, where you can get unstuck.
Yeah, you have to identify it, which is why you're throwing the tool of like get to the root, change the fruit. Which, by the way, that Craig's already read and critiqued the Wayfinder book, and I'm finishing up some of the polishing through some of those critiques that were brought, because I absolutely value this man's thoughts and opinions. And one of the things that I talk about in there is root and fruit, and Craig is the person that actually heard that concept first from way back in the day, and that has absolutely impacted so much of my life, because as you know, Craig, and as you know, Eric, and if Amy were on here, she would surely attest, Neal has a lot of fruit issues, which means Neal has a lot of root issues. And all of us, I think, if we're being honest, we could openly admit that. But here is me openly admitting something again, Craig. Are you ready for this? I'm pretty sure that the listeners are going to petition the Neal and Amie website, and they're going to ask this website to no longer be called nealandamie.com. I think they're going to want it to be craigandamie.com.
Well, brother, God has his way in the whirlwind.
Back in the day, you remember when you always used to say to me, you know what, that wife of yours, if we could just clone her, that would be real nice.
That's right. And release her into the church world. There would be a much better world.
I think there'd be a lot less church people is what would be happening.
I think so.
At least in the modern day existence.
Expedited grieving would be happening east, west, north, and south. But, brother, this stuff all of life is leaving and entering. All of life is this primary cycle of grieving in order to taste newness. I've been through that my entire life. I gave you that example. I remember my mom had read this National Enquirer article or something about take your kid's teddy bear and blankie.
That's a very good source, by the way. I get a lot of my marriage advice from the National Enquirer.
Most your sermons, I understand, also. But my mom read some article, just some harebrained concept to go take your kids' toys and make them depend on important things. And they took it. It was too early. I would have given the blankie up. I would have given the teddy bear up, but my love tanks weren't filled. My minerals and vitamins on that were not. It wasn't the right time. And so they went and removed that from me. And I remember just the horrible feeling. It wasn't an animal dying or a parent dying, which I had actually fantasized about at that point.
Right.
When they were that stupid to take my toy. But to a child in a child's universe, that is just as much a Herculean loss as someone who loses their job, their identity, a body part. And yet it's like, where do you go with that grief? You usually go to a parent that says, suck it up, shut up, get over it. The kids in China are suffering more than you. Well, their suffering doesn't really affect me, Mom. Thanks.
Right.
So we're usually quenched or shut down, let alone not taught steps towards grief.
Absolutely.
And that's why I got stuck in my life because I'm so nice that I would always, when I would go through a loss, I just sort of stuff the beach ball under the water and say, well, there are people suffering more than me, and I'll be okay. And when you become a Christian, it's like, trust God, we spiritualize it. And someone is expressing a horrible symptom or fruit of grief, and we say, well, did you pray about it? Read the Bible more. Well, if you don't teach people how to grieve, all the Bible reading in the world is not going to do anything for you.
Right. It's making me think of
all
maturity.
the church meetings.
Right. Well, because to me, and again, I have a long way to go, but I feel like the older that I'm getting, the more that I'm learning to live with losses, and the more that I'm learning to accept those losses, consider them for what they are, and then move into that next season. And it's reminding me of Henry Cloud's book, Necessary Endings, which I'm pretty sure, I'm sure you've read that, Craig?
Oh, yes. Dr. Henry Cloud is an angel.
Yeah, and the concept of loss, like something is leaving my life, whatever that may be, from a teddy bear to a parent or whatever it is, if we don't learn how to end it, right? You've always said to me, if you don't end well, you're not going to enter well.
That's right.
And I feel like the process of maturity as a human being, a lot of it has to do with learning how to grieve. And if we can learn how to handle loss, I believe that in some ways that's kind of like the epitome of maturity in some sense. Do you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah. The maturity that you see when someone is able to process a loss, first that means they understand, all of life is leaving and entering. Only grief permits newness. So I'm going to have to relinquish old things to receive new things. So, okay, let me deal with this. And that denial kicks in. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe my spouse cheated on me. This is not even possible. This happens to other people. I'm so angry. I don't know what to do. I'm going to lose my mind. Been bargaining. I'll do anything to get them back. Yeah, we all sin. We're all sinners. That betrayal didn't mean that, I betrayed people too. We bargain anything. Then we fall into depression about it. Oh my God. Now I'm betrayed. Now my life is over. And then eventually we move to some kind of acceptance that the situation can't be resolved. But it's a process. Grief isn't a place. It's a process. And I've had to grieve so many losses in my life. And I've had to learn because my parents, bless their hearts, were no roadmap or blueprint for grief. They didn't teach me how to grieve. They just sort of, said, well, get over it.
Yeah.
They'd point to someone suffering worse than me losing my teddy bear, and that really doesn't mollify your grief at all.
Right.
Like someone saying, well, the guy across the street lost 20 kids. You only lost one. But you see, that isn't healing. In fact, I got a hold of a book, and It's in its 20th year edition now. It's called the Grief Recovery Handbook, written by a guy named John James, and he is the founder of the Grief Recovery Institute. And it's a handbook that just changed my life. That's awesome. Because my father had just passed, and I was in the midst of dealing with grief, and nobody was helping me with it. And I got a hold of this in a secondhand bookstore, and it was so helpful. They show you what grief is, the 10 things you never say to a grieving person, which are the things we say to everyone.
We just make this whole podcast about grief for the next year.
That's the tattoo, Neal, we were talking about. You need to get that.
Yeah,
that's not on the forehead. That's the 10 steps. Yeah. So that book helped me because I didn't know that, one analogy that really helped me was that we have 3 children inside of us. We have the needy child, the sobbing child, and the controlling child. And the controlling child just keeps a grip on the grieving child. That just, shut up, don't you grieve, don't you let one tear out, be quiet, suck it up. And once we can break that controlling child, then the sobbing child can come out. And once the sobbing child comes out, then the needy child can be presented to the actual need that needs to be confronted and met. And that's what therapists do in their gift and their anointing. They look inside of us and they go, okay, here's your need. Here's where the original wounding happens. That's the needy part. And here's the sobbing associated with that. And here's the control. They're trying to shut the whole thing down.
Right.
So you break the grip of the controlling child, you let the sobbing child sob, and then you get to the point where the actual need can be healed.
Yeah.
And so that image is always in my mind. And grief is a process. When my dad died, initially I didn't feel anything. I had to do the service, and I had to get it together. I had to drive 100 miles, and I had to just deal with the body. I had to walk in and see him laying in the bed, and it's cold and it's surreal. And I had to take his wedding ring off. They were waiting with the gurney for me to take the wedding ring off of his hand so they could remove his body. And this was surreal,
right,
and weird. And so, initially we disassociate in the moment, so we can survive.
Right.
And that's a form of denial.
Yes.
But then, I thought, I'm handling this pretty well. Until I wasn't.
Right.
Then the song came on the radio over the next, 6-7 months. I'll be watching a movie. I'm flying. All of a sudden, I'm sobbing like a baby.
Right.
And I hear someone says something, or I see someone that reminds me of my dad. And it was this process kicking in. But I learned enough at that point to let the tears flow, let the sobbing child pour out all of that. And then it would be, little pockets of grief were wept one bit at a time. And then it's a process.
Right.
And you start at least not, bottling it all up and denying it.
Right. Right. Helping somebody move from one stage to the next, kind of helping them process through what advice or thoughts do you have as the stages are taking place, and let me kind of preface this. Do you remember a man by the name of Norman Wright by chance?
Norman Wright, one of my favorite authors. Yeah.
Really? Okay. Well, if it's the same Norman Wright, he talked a lot about grief as well, if I'm not mistaken. And
he has a book called Helping Those in Grief.
Okay.
One of the best books on grief.
And I want to say if he's still alive, he's in his 90s. About a decade ago, we had a sweep of horrible youth suicides that had taken place in our community. And Mr. Wright came to town and met with us and spent some time. And he described grief as the internal core of like a softball. And if you were to tear that skin off the outside, unstitch it, and look on the inside, it's just this corded, bundle of string basically that's running every different direction. And one of the illustrations was that on one line of that string is sadness, on the next line is anger, and they're all just overlapping, crossing over in a tangled up mess. So that image is there when I think of grief, and oftentimes people don't know how to, it's just one thing hits and the next thing hits. And it's kind of like you were describing when, you had lost your dad and you're just watching a movie and bam, you're sad, or in the next moment you're laughing. But how do we understand and kind of move through that process of grief? Are there any like practical things that you learned or did to, through your grief process?
Well, you mentioned Dr. Henry Cloud. I don't think there's a finer author or clinician in the world than the man. And his book, Necessary Endings, deals with what you just said. It's like, first of all, we need safety. We need safe people in our lives. When we're grieving, when we're hurt, we usually want to reach out to a temporary mood-altering experience. That we have legitimate needs that we sometimes want to meet in legitimate ways. Mm-hmm. That's why when we drink, when we reach out for sex, or we reach out for food, or we reach out for anything that gives a temporary comfort in the moment, mm-hmm. that has life-damaging consequences ultimately. That's the whole cycle of addiction.
Yes.
But, I view addiction as a hunger for heaven. Mm-hmm. I don't view addicts as sick, weird, nasty people. I view all addiction as a hunger for heaven.
Explain.
That we are all these wounded and hurting little ones, and that God loves and adores, and his son gave his life for us. And he loves us so much that he's implanted in us these legitimate needs, but they can only be met in legitimate ways. And that involves reaching out to healthy, safe people.
Yes. Because
the bottle is predictable, but it isn't helpful. It's not a safe relationship.
Right.
People climb into a bottle, or even, whatever it is.
Gallon of ice cream, and they broke up with me, and now you see it in the movies all the time. They sit there and they're eating their gallon of ice cream, and then 2 days later, there's 5 of them sitting around them, and chips, and all the sauce.
Right.
Yeah.
But to understand that is an attempt at self-comfort.
Yes.
That's what all illicit sexual relations are. Emotionally, we're hungry. I always say never go shopping hungry. When you eat a nice healthy meal, then you buy the Sprouts and you buy the good stuff. When you go shopping hungry, you buy the Twinkies, the Ho-Hos, and all the stuff you come home with, and the licorice and everything else. And I've found that whenever I am confronted with grieving, that I need to recognize it, and I need to take that to the safe people in my life.
Yes.
And, again, Dr. Henry Cloud and John Townsend wrote a book called Finding Safe Relationships. That's another book. Because what does safety look like? What do safe people aren't perfect people, but they love you, they're trustworthy, and you can pour out the contents of your heart without fear of annihilation and judgment. And so having safe relationships is so important. Because that allows us to be able to be fully naked and unashamed, where you can be utterly who you are, where you are in the process of your life, and someone loves you, and they draw a circle around your good parts and your bad parts, and they say, I love you.
Yep.
And I'm not, I always like to say to people at church that you can belong here before your behavior is perfect and your belief is perfect.
Yeah.
You have to have people where you can belong safely in the relationship before your behavior is perfect and your belief is perfect.
Right.
That's number one, I think, because if we don't have a safe place to run to, we say, I run to God. Well, of course you run to God, but we need love with skin on it.
Right.
We need God. He's the one that points us to interpersonal relationship in the Bible. He built us where us and God aren't enough, that we require for health interdependent relationships with others. So pray that God would bring safety into your life. And that's what sometimes if you don't have, you say, great, I don't have any safe people. Well, that's what therapists are for. You're paying them not to be your friend.
Right.
You're paying them to be safe for you.
Yeah. So
that's number one.
Before you move on to number 2, and hold that thought, because I know you're you can do that. 2 weeks ago, we talked about the importance of quiet time and reflection. Last week, we talked about the importance of intentionally stopping and checking in, what we call the checkpoints. This week, I was really going to focus on on that safe person thought and going to connect it to the thought of therapy. Yesterday, when I was talking with you on the phone, I'm like, oh man, we got to dive into grief. We got to do this. And I ultimately was hoping that we were going to be able to bring it back around to the safe people conversation. So it's almost like you hear like maybe words from God or something like that. That could have just happened. I'm just saying, maybe not. I mean, it's happened once probably in your life. But the critical nature and what I was writing about in Wayfinder, when Donnie, who was, he attempted to hurt himself and the trigger was squeezed and the bullet was removed from the gun from his dad, he was alive and the click went off in his head. And the very first thing that Donnie thought is, I need to get my life right. I need to go see Neal. And I was for Donnie in that moment, that safe person that he reached out to. That, I'm no licensed clinical therapist, but I think you hit it on the head by saying, it is critical that we view those safe relationships as therapy sessions. And I know you know that, Craig, because every time I call you, therapy begins. It's kind of, and I've even told you in the past, like, I want to be able to contribute to your life in some way, shape, or form. Because every time I do call, it's like, man, you become a safe place. You become a sounding board. I have, really one or two other people that are coach mentors in my life that do that same kind of a thing. But I guarantee you this, when I'm stuck or I'm struggling or I'm trying to move to the next thing, like you or James or Bob, those are calls that I might make and say, hey, this is kind of where I'm at right now. And then the therapy begins, the safety begins, and then I begin moving through that process of grief. And honestly, I don't think I would have made it without men like yourself in my life to help me move through.
Well, that's the whole process. We're supposed to, Jesus said, freely receive, freely give. We're all leaving and entering. We're all leaving one state of affairs to enter into the next. We all need to grieve so newness can emerge in our lives.
Yeah.
And that's what the kingdom of God is like. I always like to say that, we're lighthouses. Lighthouses don't jump off their pedestals and go try to save ships. They just stand and let their light shine. The ships find the lighthouse. And God wants us to be lighthouses. It's that old story of the little boy that's terrified upstairs. And he says, Mommy, I'm scared. Please come up here. And she goes, well, honey, Jesus is with you. And the boy says, yeah, Jesus is with me, but I need love with skin on it.
Yeah.
That's what safety is, love with skin on it. And we need that in our lives in order to grieve. Because, when you look at these 5 stages, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, wherever you are right now, if you have a safe person who's not judging you, just loving you and being with you, just being a presence in people's lives. We don't need to answer their Bible questions. We don't need to solve for X. We don't need to fix them. We don't need to give them sermons. We just need to be a presence in someone's life. The Apostle Paul said, weep with those that weep, rejoice with those that rejoice. That's a good scripture right there.
Absolutely.
We just need to be there. And when we're there, the beach balls sort of are free to come up, and we're free to grieve and wail and scream and cry and cuss and whatever we need to be or do to process these legitimate emotions. If somebody isn't going to judge us,
right,
and isn't going to correct us, and they're just there.
Yeah.
And then the Holy Spirit shows up. God shows up. When we love like God loves, God shows up in a room.
Yeah.
And that's what I didn't need another sermon. I can go online and get sermons.
Right.
I need help. I need love. I need friendship. I need, care. I need nurturing.
Yes.
And there are times in my life, though, that I reached out for that, a legitimate need, in an illegitimate way. I trusted the wrong person.
Right.
That's something we all learn. Whoopsie doodle.
Yeah.
Jesus said, don't cast your pearls before swine. Don't give what is holy to the dogs. And we've all done that.
Yeah.
We're in a desperate moment. We pour out whatever, all of the contents of our heart to the wrong man, woman, boy, or girl.
Yeah.
That can be the most wounding experience of a lifetime.
Yeah.
So handling grief is really important to negotiate the ship through the coral reefs.
Yeah.
that we have safety we're pursuing in our life so that when we grieve, and it's inevitable, we know the number to call.
Yeah, absolutely. So I stopped you before you rolled the number 2. Did you already hit it, or are you, or do you even need to hit it?
Well, no, there is the safety thing is the biggest thing, because once you're on the safe island, that's where you can cry. And, there was a therapist out here that I love, older gentleman, and he's not like your talk therapist who just bobs his head like a dog in the back of a 57 Chevy and then takes your $100 and sends you out. He's an active therapist. He gets you in touch with the process of grief. Then he hands you a bataka. One of those little Nerf batakas, like a bat.
Okay.
And then he puts you on the chair with whatever, if you had an abusive parent or a terrible experience, he brings that up to you for you to whack that thing and go at it and destroy it.
Yeah.
And he was very sweet. He would say, okay, imagine this is a samurai sword now. We're going to slice this experience to pieces, but no worries, because at the end, Jesus is going to resurrect them from the dead, and everybody's going to be fine. And he wasn't just a talk therapist, because most people don't need that. That's so 80s.
Yeah. We
need to get this up. When you have Montezuma's revenge, you need to vomit and poop until there's no more vomit and there's no more poop. We in Egypt, I used to take tours to Israel, Egypt, and Greece. In Egypt, it's not a question of if you get sick, it's when you get sick. And in Egypt, you pray for Montezuma's revenge to feel better.
Yeah.
Because what you get in Egypt is 5 days. Yeah. And I it's a crass analogy, but it really sort of says it all.
Yeah.
When you have that much toxic poison inside you, I don't care how nice you are, that's got to come out.
Yeah.
And it's going to come out in a redemptive way or in a rude way. That's what Jack Hayford would say. It can come out redemptively or toxically. But, when we were in Egypt, man, you were in the cabin for 5 days until you just couldn't throw up. You couldn't go to the bathroom anymore. And I think that's the way we get emotionally.
Yeah.
And if we have a safe place where we can process that, and active therapeutic environments where you can take the bataka, it's not allowing somebody to get stuck in their rage and hate, because that's not really helpful.
Yeah.
But to get it up and out, whether you get in your car and go and scream and cuss around the block, or whether you kick socks against the wall, there has to be some actual relief and release.
Yes.
Rather than just sitting in church as nice Christian people.
Yeah.
And hearing another 5,000 sermons for that month. That doesn't help me.
No.
When I need the toilet, that another sermon doesn't help me.
Not when I need to get the junk out. So, question: I feel like I am sometimes surrounded by perpetual crybabies. I'm surrounded by people, and that might sound strong, and it was kind of meant to. I'm surrounded by people who, go, I was hurt back in 1993 by this woman, and technically I was only a 6th grader, but she broke up with me. And then, my life, it just carries on. And here I am, I'm 43, and I'm still impacted by what that young girl said to me. And it's like, get over it. Like, there's a certain time, and this is, I don't want to minimize. I feel like there's a dichotomy or a paradigm that we have to kind of deal with here, which is that one of, hey, be the safe person, be the listener, get it out. But for gosh sakes, once it's out, get off the toilet, like quit, like move on. Right. Like you can't keep one foot in the past and one foot, in the future. You've got to either enter or go back, one way or another. Yeah. And as you've been talking, the passage from Psalm 30, verse 5, it says, the weeping may last for the night, but the joy comes in the morning. And I think there are some people I talk to where they're like, well, that's just not true. Not true. The joy never comes. I never get the joy because I'm just stuck in weeping. And every single day, somebody hurts me. And every single day, it's like this constant mentality of being stuck in the struggle. And, for us, like if we're going to help people overcome, that means that they've got to learn how to process grief. So what about those that just stay perpetually stuck in it and say, the weeping, it just continues on. I've never had a good day in my life and I'm 80 years old. Like, what about that? How do we help people arrive at joy levels while, processing ongoing grief?
Well, I usually say when most people ask for counsel, they're looking for an accomplice.
Mm-hmm.
When most people, say, hey, can I need your help? Usually it's they want you to rubber stamp. They want to vent.
Yeah.
And this is another concept. Dr. John Townsend discusses good time versus bad time. Good time versus bad time. When you're growing as a person, let's say you go through 5 years in your life goes by, and you're growing and you're maturing and you're learning and you're becoming, that's good time. That's 5 years of development, growth, and maturity. But bad time is just when 5 years go by and you haven't grown, you haven't matured, you haven't advanced, you haven't made an attempt. That's called bad time.
Right.
We all have that experience. You see someone you haven't seen in 10 years.
Right.
And they're exactly stuck where they were 10 years ago.
Right.
The time has gone by, but it has not been redemptive to them. It's not involved their participation at all in their growth.
Right.
Now, I always say if you have 8 ounces of water, don't water the brown spot in the backyard. Those people I step over to get away from.
Right.
Those I don't need to judge them, but they're not engaged in the moment. They're not wanting to learn. You give them a book title, they'll never read a book.
Yep.
You point them to a 12-step group that would transform their lives in 2 weeks, and they'll never go.
Right.
Because they just don't have time and no one could drive them.
Yep.
Folks like that are just sort of, as Henry Cloud points out, in Necessary Endings. Those people you prune out of your life. God is not calling you to them.
Right.
Because they're not interested in growing. So it's important, though, not to allow time wasters like that. That's what you weed out of your lawn.
Okay.
When you're going to use the water, you have to do pruning.
Yep.
And in your backyard, you get rid of all the weeds that are taking up the water, and you water the rose plant that's growing. That deserves the water. So I have to know in my life who to invest me into.
Yes.
And once I perceive someone stuck, not just for the moment, but they will not. It's not that they cannot, but they will not better themselves.
Right.
There cannot and will not are two different things.
Totally.
And when I perceive this person's a will not, that just will not, they've gone through 4 different churches before they got to me, and they're telling the same sob story. And I always say recover or repeat. If people are not recovering, they're repeating the same behavior.
Right.
And time is not helping them, and no one yet can help them because they don't want to participate in the process.
Right.
So it's good to really know, because I was so nice, I would allow, time wasters like that to absorb most of my time as a pastor.
Right.
And that was a horrible mistake as a young man that I made.
So question.
Oh my God, I should have been pouring my life into those who were in good time, who were growing, who were open, who were learning, who were sinful, but they were falling forward.
Yes.
They were attempting to participate in grieving their losses. And that's where it took me years to identify that one person and say, I'm going to pour myself into them.
Right. So, and I love that because I do think that the many people that are listening to this are in that same, they're helpers and they need help. Just like I try to be, like you try to be, we need help and we're helpers. But what about for that person that in some sense you almost just described as a weed, as somebody who is not wanting to move on, yet they keep asking, hey, or they want to tell their story. Do you have any advice for somebody who's in that position to kind of motivate or get them to kind of snap out of that mindset?
Yeah, have nothing to do with them. It was called the boundaries. You have to draw boundaries. If someone's not going to get better, I don't know what I can do. If God can't help them himself, I don't know what I can do.
Yep.
Now, I used to think I was nicer than Jesus. I wanted to get a shirt that said, "Come to me, I'm nicer than Jesus." Because I was going to help everybody, and I knew I could love them, and whoever they've been through, they could come to me, and I'll stride along with them. And boy, that was a hubris.
Yeah,
that was arrogance.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. So, but I think what I was meaning is, do you have advice for the person that actually is just stuck in perpetual grief and not wanting to change? Like, is there anything?
Well, you have to. Well, in John chapter 5, our Lord Jesus, he goes to the pool of Bethesda, which was this big hospital with hundreds of people there sick.
Right.
And he walks up to a guy that's been crippled 38 years, and he says, "Wilt thou be made whole?" That sounds like a stupid question to ask a man who's been crippled for 38 years.
Right.
But it's not a stupid question, because if you get healed, you have to give up your handicap sticker.
Ooh. But I still want to park up front,
healed,
Craig.
You can't. There you go. I know you want that good mall parking, but if you get healed, you can't hang around in the bar with the barflies.
Yeah.
If you get healed, so this question about, well, of course I want to get healed. No, you have to answer that question yourself. Wilt thou be made whole?
Yeah.
And so, people need to realize, do I want to complain or do I want to advance?
Right.
And that's something that everyone chooses, but we can't waste our lives and all of our time striving along with people that won't even give God a chance to come into their life and help them.
Yes. Yeah.
That's where we have to graciously, it'd be nice, but cross them out of your book in terms of your spending your valuable lifetime with people who won't change. It's amazing when you draw boundaries with people and sort of walk away from them. That's when they usually get the idea to change. It's usually desperation.
Right.
It's pain or pleasure that'll motivate you to get better. And if someone isn't at that pain or pleasure point where they're going to, I can't help them with that. I'll pray for you from a great distance away.
Yeah, a great distance away.
Well, I heard it not to just throw all kinds of pneumatic devices out, but these things help me.
Yes.
Categories help me. Now, there are three kinds of people in your life. There are wise people, there are foolish people, and then there are evil people. And wise people are people that when truth comes to them or reality comes to them, they adapt to it and they align themselves with truth.
Right.
That's a wise person. Yes. Reality dawns on you. Whoops. Ooh, boy, I can do that better. Boy, I think reality wins. I always say reality is what happens when you're wrong. Reality is what intrudes itself into your life when you're wrong. Well, I thought I had gas in my car. Well, you're wrong. Reality is brutal.
Right.
And reality always wins. So wise people accept truth and reality and they embrace it and they grow. A fool, it doesn't mean, it's not pejorative. It doesn't mean someone's stupid. A fool is someone who, when reality comes to them, they try to deflect it, dismiss it, alter it, or change it. Mm-hmm. And we know you could have a PhD in psychology and be the biggest fool in the room, because when truth or light comes to you, you deflect it, you dismiss it, you try to change it and alter it. And we all know people, and we've all, in a sense, been wise and foolish in our lives.
Correct.
There are times when we accept truth in life and adapt to it, that's when we're wise. But if we reject truth and try to control it, we're stupid. We're fools at that point.
Right.
And then evil people are just people that you call the police and deal with lawyers, and they're just wicked. They're a thorn in your life, and they're going to destroy you. And you have nothing to do.
Yep.
There's certain people that Paul the Apostle said after one admonition have nothing to do with it. But most people are just sort of in the process between wisdom and foolishness.
Right.
And so it's really good to know when we're being wise and accepting reality and growing, or we're being foolish or resisting reality and not growing.
Right.
And so, but also there is a category of people that are just time wasters in perpetuity, and God has someone to reach them whenever they're ready. But it's like AA says, when you're ready, we're here.
Right.
They don't ask for money. They don't go out proselytizing. AA doesn't evangelize. They don't go out to the mall with a bullhorn and tell everybody that, who they are. And they know that when you're ready and you want to grow and you want to change and you're over the arguments and you're done playing, here's a place where you can go that's safe for you.
Yeah.
And they don't even seek people. And that's the greatest thing I've learned over these years in ministry is I just simply be the man I'm supposed to be, and by gosh, the Lord brings people to me.
Yes.
At the right time, who are hungry, thirsty, ready. They want wisdom. They want teaching. But I used to waste my time on most folk that just were not ready.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, so, and it ends up being fruitless. It ends up, your marriage can fade out because you're putting priority in the wrong places. And I think you hit it on the head by ultimately saying that grief and walking the process of grief, there's got to be a hunger for growth that's kind of, or a desire to move through it. Otherwise, you can stay stuck in it. And I personally feel like when I choose in the simplest of ways each and every day to trust God in the middle of very difficult circumstances, then I can say that passage is true, that, yeah, weeping, it may last for the night, but joy does come in the morning. But then weeping happens again because night does happen again, but then joy happens again. And that joy in that idea of I'm growing, I'm moving forward, it's enough to keep me hungry for more. That's for sure.
Yes.
So yeah,
one of the components to grief are tears. You just keep mentioning tears. Well, tears are a language God understands. Tears are the diamonds of the soul.
Yeah.
And tears, they literally have different chemical components. When you can look it up on Google. When you see tears of grief and sorrow, they have one set of chemical components. When you have tears of joy and delight, they have a different set of chemical components.
Wow.
And I believe for some of our listeners, the Lord is changing the nature of your tears.
Mm.
You know, he's changing the tears from grief, from devastation, tears as a result of extraordinary loss, into the other kind, which are joy comes in the morning.
Yeah.
Psalm 126 says, when the Lord turned our captivity, then we were as them that dreamed. And those that go forth bearing the precious seed of tears will no doubt return, carrying their sheaves of blessing with them. I think the Lord's changing the nature of the tears of some of his people.
Yeah.
Where it's just not endless tears of grief and loss, but moving those tears. Now, from a distance, they look the same. Your face is wet. People don't know when they see you crying at a distance if it's from joy or abject loss.
Right.
But, those are just what a language God understands. So we have to become safe people who understand the language of tears.
Yes.
Where people are comfortable. The Bible says that God catches all of our tears in a jar. That every tear we've ever wept over every issue, he's kept each individual tear and he's placed them in his book.
Right.
That he collects our grief. He values our grief. And he loves us so much that he sent his son Jesus to an agonizing, grievous death of abject suffering beyond what any of us have physically endured, because he wanted to enter in with us into our losses.
Right.
So when you go to Jesus, it isn't like go to Jesus. He is the suffering servant. He empathizes. He weeps with you. He holds you in his arms as you weep. Mm-hmm. These things matter to him. These tears are valuable to him.
Right.
And that's a Lord I can go to.
Yeah.
With my kids, I decided early, when they sin, I want them to run to me, not from me.
That's good. That's good.
I want, no matter what they've done, I want to be the first person that they're thinking to run to. I've got to go to Daddy.
That's safe.
And
that's
boy, that's
love.
something for all of us parents to realize.
Man,
they don't
beautiful.
need a peer, they need a parent, but they need a parent that's safe enough and relatable enough and lovable enough that they could go to you and pour out the most intimate issues of their brokenness.
Yeah.
And be able to belong, whether their behavior is perfect or their belief is perfect.
Yeah.
They need to belong. I know that's a high standard, but that was my choice early on.
Yeah.
Because I saw the worst kids in the world were pastors' children. Right. And they were the most wounded, my God, PKs, pastors' kids.
Yeah.
And so I just thought, my God, I don't want to drive them away. I don't want to create an environment where they've got to run away from me to find God.
Right.
But if you're honest and transparent enough, and real enough, and people will perceive you as safe.
Yeah. Well,
I think
brother,
that's
I
our
can
goal.
tell you that you have, I know, helped a lot of people today that are listening to this, and I just want to thank you so much. I mean, our conversations, what the purpose was is, hey, let's give people kind of a glimpse into some of our talks, and I hope maybe in the future you'd be happy to do this again, and if you're not, you might just be on a conversation with me, and you could be recorded and not even know it. I know that's not legal, but that's okay.
Well, it's my pleasure to be with you guys. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank
and,
you.
I just thank God for our listeners, and I just want to encourage them that there's a way out. The way out is the way through. It's going to get better. It's going to be okay. Sometimes you just need to hear it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
That maybe baby steps are powerful. Just do the next right thing. When you can't do everything, do the next right thing. And God will just give you enough light to see the next right step to take.
Yeah.
So be of good courage.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Eric, I think you might have almost jumped in on something.
Yeah, I almost interrupted by accident. Craig, is there a place that our listeners can find you if they want more Craig Johnson, a website or a book or anything?
Wow. Well, yeah, they could go to our website, drcraigjohnson.org.
Wonderful.
And we have, I would say, 800 or 900 messages there, all free and available on every conceivable topic, including grief, including what we discussed today. And there's just a sort of a potpourri and a mixed bag of all kinds of messages.
Yeah. I'll tell you this, on my phone, I have about 5 different podcasts, and Craig's has been something that I've turned to if I'm personally looking for Bible teaching that is clear, that's deep, and yet it's still at the same point understandable and digestible. That is exactly where I go. So I'm glad you said that, Eric, because I definitely wanted people to know to go to drcraigjohnson.org to be able to listen to that. There's only a few voices, honestly, in the Christian community that I'm honestly, truly inspired by these days, and he is certainly one of those. I feel like a lot of other church ministries, there's a lot of rah going on, and trust me, I'm a rally guy. I love to rally. But there's a depth that you find when listening to Craig, and I know you just experienced that, so definitely want to encourage you to do that. Craig, I got to tell you, man, we love you so much. Can you make fun of Amy for just a minute? I feel like it's important to tease about Amy in some way.
Man, no, I can't make fun of her. She is one of God's pearls. All you can do is just adore her. That's it.
Yep, that is it.
I just thank God for that woman.
Yeah.
I just thank God. And again, the cloning is still on the table.
Well, I don't know if if the world can handle 2 of her, I don't know if you could actually, I'm not sure, my friend.
Aren't clones like copying an old VHS tape where each successive copy gets lower quality, though?
Oh, no. You have to get my 12 tape series on cloning women, and you'll understand.
Well, we love you, my friend. Thank you so much for being
with
us,
guys.
and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
So, Eric,
yes.
Give me just improv thoughts on grief as we just talked with Craig. Like, what connected? Did anything connect with you specifically out of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going through grief right now for my dog Ghost that died. Well, he died, but it was like weird circumstances. But anyway, it was only a few months ago, so I'm just going through all those steps.
Yeah. I mean, the handles of some of the acronyms that he dropped to very helpful. In fact, the DABDA, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I know he told me that one years ago. But, as Amy and I are journeying through this process right now of transition, she's transitioning, and I can see in those stages, because we're close, we're walking through some of those together. So, and I was thinking that, honestly, that the loss, of Ghost, like how impactful that was. And, and then to be able to have handles. There are people that are listening. I have family members that just moved, and there's grief that comes with moving, from one city to the next. There's just the entering and leaving. I'm going to take that away for sure. Thank you for listening to this episode. We would love it if you shared it. Eric, how could they do that, or what direction do you have for that?
Oh, you can share it on social media. You can like us on Facebook. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. You can rate our podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And you can send your stories to info@nealandamie.com.
Awesome. And if anybody kicks a story concerning grief or overcoming or anything that resonated from this to that email address, we will send the first person a free gift of a traction planner just for participating in that. And you can find traction planners as well. They're at a discounted rate right now of 33% off as we're moving into a new season. We have some great surprises coming up for the new year as well that we're working on right now, and we're excited about all of that. So we thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and we will catch you on the next episode.